Hello everyone, I just finished work and have about 15 minutes before my kids come home from daycare. I wanted to share about some books that I've recently read, some that I'm currently reading, and some that I picked up from the library. I do get all of my books from the library. I don't buy any books anymore. I've moved across the country quite a few times in my life, less often now. So I've just been all over the place. In all of those moves, I've pared down my books less and less. And eventually I just said enough is enough, and I get all of my books from the library. The only time in the last few years I can even remember buying a book was when it was an impulse purchase at the airport, and in fact I didn't even read it. I still have it, but it's on a to be read list. Of course I do purchase books for my children. We have a ton of children's books around. I just don't buy any books for myself anymore. Everything comes from the library, either physically or I get their ebooks or audiobooks through the Libby app. I do also listen to some books on Spotify, but that's pretty rare. I don't have an Audible subscription anymore. All that to say, I have a few books from the library that I wanted to share with you. I am on Goodreads, and I'm happy to put a link to my Goodreads account below, but I'm liking that platform less and less, so I don't know if I would recommend it. Goodreads has put these lists in which if you read one, you get kind of a reward or like a little badge. So they've kind of gamified reading so that you read more books, and specifically the books that they're recommending, I'm sure there's some sort of deal in it for them. Goodreads is owned by Amazon. So of course it all has to do with money. So in the first quarter that they did that, it goes by quarters. In the first quarter that they did that, I wanted to check them all off, and then they added more and more. And so the second quarter that they did it, I just gave up. I wasn't even going to attempt it. And I've been doing that until recently. And I don't know why, for some reason, in January, I just was happened to have gotten a few on just from reading books that I was already reading. And now I have this weird itch to finish all of them. The two books that I've read recently were specifically read to check those boxes and get those little bookmark badge things that they give you on Goodreads. I'm sorry if you can hear my dog snoring. I can't help it. He's just tired old boy. The two books that I've read recently, I had heard about them from the only book podcast that I've ever listened to. So the only book podcast that I regularly listen to is called Books Unbound. And the book that I read that was to get this badge and from Books Unbound was called The Wager. And it's a nonfiction book about a ship that was shipwrecked off the coast of Chile, and how those sailors survived the shipwreck and living on kind of an unsustainable, uninhabitable island for many months, and then how they made it back to England. What happened when they got back to England? They were all court-martialed, so it was kind of a little bit of the drama around that. The book was mentioned in that Books Unbound podcast, but not necessarily recommended. The person on the podcast just wanted to read more boat books. That was a goal of hers. So I'd marked it on my list. I saw it on that Goodreads list, so I decided to go ahead and read it. I do read five-ish nonfiction books a year. So this is not something unheard of for me to read. It's just not something that I know for a fact I'll enjoy. And I would say the beginning of it was pretty slow. But I had read that in the reviews that it was kind of setting the scene and kind of giving you a lot of background on sailing at the time, and less about the kind of juicy drama that I was interested in. I want to read about a mutiny. The mutiny, I say mutiny in quotes, you can read it for yourself if you want. It happens in the second act. So the first act is kind of more setting the scene. I did give it a chance, and I did finish the book, and certainly the third act and the court-martial was the most interesting to me, and I read it very quickly. I don't know if it's actually a shorter part of the book or I just read it faster because it was more interesting to me. Yeah, I certainly recommend it if you're into nonfiction and or sailing. The next book I read was called Lincoln and the Bardo, which is a book that won a lot of prizes, which doesn't necessarily mean that it's good or that I would like it. I did finish it, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. So I had heard about this book also from a book podcast. The only other one I've ever listened to, and I've only listened to 2 episodes, is called Shoulda Books. And the premise is kind of what are books that you should have read in your lifetime, and kind of getting people's take on what are their all-time favorite books. And so anyway, in one of the episodes, this book is mentioned. And so I gave it a shot. I would say I did start listening to it on audiobook because it is a full cast. It is marketed as 160 cast members. However, that was so hard to follow. Not everyone in that cast was a narrator, and I'm not really sure how they recorded the narration at all. Mostly volumes changed and speed changed, so I like to listen to books on 1.5 speed. This was like people's speed of how fast they read changed, so I was constantly changing it, plus their volume was changing, and I couldn't keep up. Not only could I not keep up with like audibly listening to it, but also I couldn't keep up with the story because it changed so many times, and it was hard for me to piece out which character was speaking at the time. So I switched to the ebook, and it was kind of the same way. They did describe who was speaking, but there were so many characters I couldn't keep up with who they were. The author also intertwined some nonfiction with the fiction, and that was interesting, but because of the nonfiction pieces, he really wanted you to know they were nonfiction. There were citations after every sentence, and it was so hard to read and follow. So in that respect, maybe the audiobook would have been better because you could hear like, oh, this account is from this person, this account is from this person. And I think it was an attempt to say people recalled the situations differently. Yeah, which is something I have never come across in a book before. I definitely thought it was interesting. It was just hard to follow. So once I actually had to Google like, what's going on in this book? Like, what is the structure of this book? And once that became clear to me, then I could follow the book a lot better. So just if you're ever going to read it, try to think like, what is the author trying to convey here? And in some cases, it's like people had conflicting recollections of an event, or just in general, like even the fiction parts, there were so many different characters trying to come across. There are so many different perspectives on one event that it almost doesn't even matter who the characters are, as long as you know you're in a new perspective and they're recalling the same event. So it was really interesting. It was just difficult. The premise of that story is that Abraham Lincoln's son died while he was in office, and the nonfiction part of that is that he kept going back to the cemetery to visit his son. And the nonfiction part is kind of a supernatural retelling of maybe what was going on while he was at the cemetery. I had to look up what Bardo meant. In my mind, I equate it to purgatory. So a lot of the supernatural aspect was ghosts in the cemetery and the events that happened while they were in the Bardo or in purgatory before they could move on to the afterlife that he described. Yeah, in general, like the book was interesting. It was very hard for me to get into it, like because of the structure of the book, like I mentioned. But once I got into it, it was interesting enough. I don't know if I would recommend it, but if kind of a different writing style or different perspectives is something that you'd be interested in, then maybe that book is for you. I am currently reading an ebook called 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes. And this one I'm reading while my son is going to sleep, but I'm still in the room kind of waiting for him to fall asleep. So it's kind of a slow read for me because I only get a short period of time to read them every day. It is a Greek retelling of, I think, the end of the Iliad and the beginning of the Odyssey. I'm only about 12% in, so I don't know kind of where it falls in that timeline. But so far it's been interesting. I think the main point of this fiction is that it's from a woman's perspective. So not just one woman, but many women's perspectives of this timeline. So far, it's been pretty interesting. I wouldn't say it's on par with some of the Madeline Miller novels that I've read, but so far, so good. I also have 2 physical books from the library. So the first is called The Co-op from Tarah DeWitt. I'm just going to categorize it as a rom-com. I have read a few of her other books before. I have not really started reading this, so I don't know much about the story. If you know and you like it, please let me know. Leave a comment. Honestly, I can read this novel in 1 or 2 sittings, so I'm really looking forward to it. I really like these rom-com books to replace watching TV shows or scrolling on TikTok. I don't have social media, so I mostly just read books. But I've read a few of Tarah DeWitt's novels before, and I really liked them. There's one of her books in particular that I started with that I didn't really like, but everything else that I've read by her I have really liked. So I'm just going to finish out all of the books that she's published so far. I would recommend her as an author. Yeah, I'll specifically put one that I really loved below, so hopefully you can check it out too. And the last one that I'm currently reading is called Clyde Fans. This was also mentioned in the Books Unbound podcast. I'll try to turn to a page that shows a good sense of what the artist style is. Here's a good one. So it's all in this kind of the same, I wouldn't call it monochromatic, black, cream, gray, and then this kind of slate blue color. And it's, yeah, a very beautiful book. I'm really enjoying the artistry, but I am on page, let me check, 163. It's a bit slow. I'm not sure this graphic novel is really for me. Usually I can read a graphic novel in one sitting, but this one has taken me a while. This is my second attempt at reading it, so I really need to finish it or give it back to the library and call it a day. Because I am a bit of the way through it, I can give a little bit of a description. At least the first 100 pages are about this man who was a salesman at his family's fan shop. So Clyde Fans is the name of the shop. And his father started it, and he and his brother kind of kept it going, and the doors closed. And it's kind of, at least the beginning part, seems like it might be about why they had to close the business. So far, the point that I'm in right now is his brother is out on a sales call, and it's not really clear why he's out on a sales call. It seems like he's very uncomfortable doing that. So yeah, I'll keep giving it a shot, and hopefully I can finish it and see if I would recommend it or not. Lastly, I did just download a few books from the Libby app. So the first one is called The Authenticity Project. And the reason I downloaded this one is because it's a potential new book club I could be a part of. This is their March book. So if I can read it in time, I'm going to try to join that book club and try and put down some more roots in the town that I live in and make some new friends. But yeah, I know nothing about that book other than it's part of this book club. So I don't know if it's something I would normally read. I literally just downloaded it because it was the book of the month. The next two are actually part of those Goodreads badge books, I'm going to call them, I guess. But they had both been on my list anyway. So the first one is called The Four Winds by Kristin Hannah, which is obviously extremely popular. I've never read any of Kristin Hannah's books. But this would be my first. They're obviously very recommended. They're well loved. And I have seen a few YouTube videos from libraries saying Kristin Hannah is always in the most checked out books. So yeah, I wanted to give one of her books a shot, and this was the first one that came up. The next one is called Our Vicious Oaths by N.E. Davenport, which, as far as I can tell, is a fantasy book. I know nothing more than that. It's on one of the Goodreads lists, and I didn't really look into it that much. I plan on giving it a try. If you've read any of those books and you want to warn me against them, or if you want to tell me you absolutely love them and I should love them too, please, please, please leave a comment. I love reading and I love talking about books, and I want to do that with more people. Thanks for listening to me ramble about books for a while. I'll see you guys all in the next video. Bye.